Hello, everyone. Welcome to the seventh concurrent session of day one, INGED 2021. And we have Mehdi, Solhi, and Serap, Önen, and they will be delivering their speech on university students' level of boredom and their coping strategies in emergency remote education during the coronavirus pandemic. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I cannot move on. Yeah, that's okay. Welcome to your presentation. With the onset of COVID-19 and the declaration of pandemic by World Health Organization, too many schools and higher education institutions were partially or fully closed. As a result, to deal with this unpredicted emergency situation, radical changes began to occur in educational practices of the countries. And the emergency closures of schools and higher education institutions severely impact the global education. And people tend to use different terminologies to refer to educational practices that are carried out from home. But as Bozkurt states, these terminologies are not adequate in capturing what is actually going on. So people tend to use distance education, online education, homeschooling, and e-learning, but we prefer to use emergency remote education. While there is an obligation, education is a generic term and it is a kind of option. And similarly, Hodge et al., they are trying to underline the difference between deliberately planned online education and unprepared remote learning experiences. And they conceptualize emergency remote teaching as a temporary shift of instructional delivery to an alternate delivery mode due to crisis circumstances. And although the current generation of students are digital natives, most of them lack previous experience of such intensive remote education. So indeed, both the coronavirus and the remote learning are likely to lead students to a growing disparity in terms of their cognitive skills, motivation, and emotional well-being. And because they are, isolated from their friends and teachers and from the classroom, these students are likely to faced with psychological and behavioral problems. And some students may encounter difficulties in home environment, such as sharing restricted space or technological equipment with other members of the family. And such kinds of inequalities may lead to short and long-term damaging consequences. There are many studies investigating academic boredom and boredom coping strategies, but the thing is, those studies are mainly based on face-to-face educational settings. So there are very few studies investigating academic boredom in the online education. So that's why we try to fill this gap by investigating prospective English language teachers' boredom levels and their boredom coping strategies in their emergency remote teaching during the coronavirus pandemic. Emotions are an important part of students' academic achievement, and previous studies on student emotions are, examined in association with motivation, happiness, foreign language anxiety, anger, and test anxiety. Boredom is also an emotional experience which affects our behaviors adversely, and it has been commonly defined as a feeling, an emotion, a state, or a negative psychological experience. And there are three key elements that make something boring. These are predictability, monotony, and confinement. And boredom has some basic characteristics, unique characteristics, such as feeling unchallenged and perceiving one's activities as meaningless. And comparing boredom with other emotional experiences, Van Tilburg and Eagle state that bored people feel restless. unchallenged, and they think that the situation serves no purpose. They don't want to engage in they want to engage in behavior that is different, purposeful, and meaningful. And there is a lot of attempts to define boredom, and these are the most prominent ones. For example, Eastwood et al. Define boredom as the aversive experience of wanting but being unable to engage in stimulating and satisfying activity. Similarly, Grinson outlines boredom as fundamentally negative subjective state where the individual experiences little interest in what is currently happening. In fact, the experience of boredom is not an attitude. It is a short-lived state. That is, a person can feel bored one day, but not the other. And even the same task or activity sometimes can make a person feel bored, but sometimes fascinated. And we do also have academic emotions. And Tekran et al. Define academic emotions as emotions that are directly linked to academic learning, classroom instructions, and achievement. And academic boredom is considered as the most frequently experienced academic emotions at educational settings. And previous research revealed that there is a kind of positive correlation between academic boredom and poor academic success, and that academic boredom leads to poor academic achievement, demotivation, inefficient use of learning strategies, and empowered self-regulation. And students tend to use different strategies to cope with boredom. The most common boredom coping strategies used by students are daydreaming, doodling, chatting, sending text messages, or passing notes to friends. In order to investigate students' boredom coping strategies, Net et al. Developed coping with boredom scale, and the scale has 4 subcategories, as you see on the slide: cognitive approach, behavioral approach, cognitive avoidance, and behavioral avoidance. Let's look at them one by one. Cognitive approach strategies are in the direction of changing the perception of the situation. I mean, for example, if a student, a language student, is bored in a class, he reminds himself that the lesson is very important and tries to cope with this boredom situation. And this is a kind of reminding strategy. And behavioral approach strategies, on the other hand, tend to change the boring circumstances. For example, a student who finds the reading lesson boring might ask the teacher to change the content or the activity he finds boring. If her request is fulfilled, then the situation could be changed and her boredom could be relieved. If not, I mean, even if the demand is denied, her attempt to make the teacher cognizant of the fact that they are bored can lead teacher to adapt the lesson. On the other hand, avoidance strategies help students forget the boring situation by thinking of something completely different or occupying themselves with something not related with the situation. Here you can see examples for that. A student might occupy her thoughts about her plan after the lesson so as to evade the boring situation. Or she may chat with a classmate during the class. Actually, chatting with a classmate during the lesson, texting, and playing games on a cell phone are other typical behavioral avoidance strategies used by the students. Previous studies on boredom, mainly examined in association with unsatisfactory accomplishment at school, reading comprehension, performance, boredom coping strategies, and perceived autonomy support. For example, using the boredom proneness scale, Mann and Robinson investigated boredom at higher education, and the results reveal that 59% of the students, like find at least half of the lessons boring, and 30% of them found most or all the lessons boring at the university. And when different teaching methods were examined closely, laboratory work, online lectures, PowerPoint without handout are found boring by the students. And the least boring teaching methods are, according to students, group work outside lectures, PowerPoint with handout, seminars, practical sessions, and group discussions in lectures, which encourage interaction and, active learning. In our study, we registered 2 questionnaires, and it is a cross-sectional study. We collected the data in the fall semester of 2021 academic year. And these are the research questions of our study. Is there a difference between male and female university students' level of boredom and their boredom coping strategies in emergency online lessons during the COVID-19 pandemic? Does the university students' educational level affect their level of boredom experiences and their boredom coping strategies in emergency online lessons during the COVID-19 pandemic? We tried to answer these questions in our study. And we began our study with the hypothesis that the transition from face-to-face education to emergency remote education might have altered the way students experience boredom and how they cope with boredom in the online education, and that the individuals who have a low boredom threshold may find the online classes really challenging. And a total of 201 undergraduate students in a range of freshmen, sophomores, junior and senior students majoring English language teaching voluntarily participated in the study. And we had 2 data collection instruments. The first one is level of boredom scale developed by Van Tilburg and Igor. It adopts a quite distinct approach to measure state boredom because it puts emphasis on the way individuals both gauge and recall boredom across a particular time frame. And a sample item from the scale, you can see, when you focus on your feelings during the emergency online lessons, how much does the feeling make you feel like doing something completely different? And how much does the feeling make you turn to a more meaningful activity? And the second data collection instrument is coping with boredom scale, and a sample from the scale, especially cognitive approach item. When I'm bored in the class, I tell myself to concentrate again. Each scale were modified according to the content of our study, modified and adapted according to online education. Thank you for listening. Now, Mehdi is going to talk about the results of our study.
Okay, Hocam, thank you. Just a moment, I'm going to share my screen right now to keep going on. Now you can see the presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, now let's just look at the results actually. And in the first research question, okay, you can see the presentation. In the first research question, we were interested to find out whether there was a difference between male and female participants. I mean, pre-service English language teachers. So, in connection with the boredom level and boredom coping strategies. So according to the results, so the male participant recorded actually a higher level of boredom than their counterparts, I mean the female participants. So this is actually what the review of literature indicates. So the male students normally and feel a bit more actually bored than the female students. So here it comes the result. So I'm just going to pass over pass over the slide here when it comes to the details and how they cope with the different boring situations. So we can see that actually when it comes to the cognitive approach, so the female students indicate more, and actually I've got they're different in terms of the cognitive and and cognitive approach and cognitive avoidance. So the female participants indicated that they they rely on cognitive approach more than the male participant. It means that, as Serap actually explained, so in cognitive approach, while doing cognitive approach strategies, so students remind themselves that the lessons are important despite being boring. So this is something that normally couldn't result during the pandemic. So the female students normally just remind themselves that, the lessons are important. So we need to keep going on in the online lessons, okay, despite of, finding the lessons boring. When it comes to the behavioral approach and behavioral avoidance, so we cannot actually see any significant difference. So of course, we can see that just like female participants have got a higher mean score, but the difference was statistically significant. So it was when it comes to cognitive avoidance, and we can see that the female participants, exhibited higher cognitive avoidance. It means that they maybe started to think of, something they plan to do actually after the school, after the classes. So they start to think about, something else in order to relieve the boring situation that they are in. So in general, according to the findings, so the female participants indicated higher level of both cognitive, and approach and cognitive avoidance than their counterpart, the male, and participants. So, but in total, when it comes to the level of, feeling bored, so the male students actually indicated higher level of, and boredom, as I just explained in the previous, slide. When it comes to actually, these are actually some of the findings that I have, and just explain. So, and here you can find the details statistically, actually, the difference between the participants in cognitive approach and cognitive avoidance. When it comes to the second research question, and we investigated actually, and just studying a different academic year, like being freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, influences, the way how they feel bored in online classes, emergency online classes. So according to the result, actually, and so there wasn't a significant difference between, the students in terms of in terms of actually and how they feel bored. So it means that they feel bored at this, and to some extent similar. So when it comes to coping with boredom, so how they cope with boredom, we cannot see any differences in cognitive approach and behavior approach. But when it comes to the behavioral avoidance, so this is the only actually significant difference that we can see in this study. So the students actually intend to, I'm talking about the participants. So here we can see that they exhibit actually different behavioral avoidance. So the behavioral avoidance is, as Serap actually explained, just like, using their cell phones, or, and just, and talking to some of the students actually who are in the class. So they just, avoid the boring situation by doing something else. So this is the behavioral, and avoidance. So when we look at actually the freshmen, we can see the mean score is 12. So when it comes to the sophomores, and that's around 15, junior 17, and the seniors actually that's 17.91. So here we can see that the senior students experienced high level of boredom, in terms of using the different strategies. Okay, so so here it seems that the senior students tend to use the behavior avoidance, boredom coping strategies, more than the others. When it comes to the discussion, and actually this is something that is echoed, as I told you, the male students exhibit a higher level of and boredom. So this is something that we can find in Önen and Coşkun Hoca's study. So we can actually see the same result. So the significant difference actually for the gender, the male participants, experiencing boredom more than the females, is that, so we need to, we need to watch out actually how they, and to cope with boredom in the class. For example, as I told you, when they feel bored, so they're more likely to give attention actually and less attention to the lessons in online education. This is something that we have found. So okay, just a moment. So yeah, again, the importance of cognitive approach. Again, as I told you, Eren and Coşkun Hoca's study indicated that students rely on, cognitive coping strategies. The students who rely actually on cognitive coping strategies, and are more likely to just become more successful. So there's a kind of, relationship between achievements of these students and how they, and cope with the boring situation. And here it says that the cognitive approach strategy means that reminding themselves that the lessons are important despite of being boring. So plays a big role in their success. So we need to teach students the different, and just coping strategies. So we need to make a kind of awareness in our classes to just make them, familiar how to cope with the boredom, and in the class. Actually, boredom is something that is unavoidable even at higher education. So I'm sure actually most of the classes we have, and the students normally indicating a behavioral avoidance while coping with the boredom. So according to results, so the males actually so and feel a bit more bored than the female students. So I just want to skip over the some slides because of managing the time more effectively. Yeah, as I told you, in Eren Hoca actually study again, and the participants who tend to a slightly higher proportion of the cognitive avoidance to cope with boredom are less likely to be effectively engaged in the learning process. So more cognitive avoidance, more cognitive actually and approach, and more success, let's say, but not actually cognitive avoidance, because avoidance is avoiding the just completely avoiding the boring situation by thinking about something else cognitive or by doing something in the class. Okay, actually, and no, I think that's the end of the talk because of the managing the time. I'm just looking at the time we are to finish actually. So I'm just going to make a kind of conclusion and saying that just knowing the strategies used by the learners to cope with the boring situation. So we would help the teacher trainers, and the instructors as well to develop, and better understanding of the behavior, so that students are likely to exhibit, in our classes. So by just eliminating some negative factors of boredom. So we, as educators, teachers, and policymakers, we consider the student gender as well as the finding of this study. Okay, actually recommends. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Serap Hocam, Mehdi Hocam, for the informative talk, and that's a very important point in terms of exploring emotions in foreign language learning and teaching. And that's great to see familiar names as well. And thank you so much for this brilliant talk. And if there are any questions, maybe you can share your email so that people could reach you if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Hocam, actually, yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Hocam, for the feedback. You can share the presentation and more details about this study.
Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I'm so glad to be here with you. Today I am going to present this topic, as you can see on the title, Students' Beliefs Regarding the Use of Authentic Materials in EFL Classes. Let's start. The purpose of this study is to present a framework about learners' beliefs regarding the use of authentic materials in EFL classes. This study was based on 4 different research questions. The first one is, what are the students' beliefs regarding the use of authentic materials in EFL classes? Next one, the second one is, what are the effects of using authentic tools on learners' English language skills? The other one is, what are the effects of using authentic tools on the motivation of English language learners? And the last one is, what are the perceptions of the students on authentic material use in the context of distance education. When it comes to the theoretical framework of this study, firstly, I would like to show you the definitions of authenticity in the literature. Wallace in 1992 defines authentic texts as real-life texts that are not written for pedagogical purposes. A prominent figure, Tomlinson, as you know, defines authenticity as any written or spoken texts which are commonly not intended to language teaching. Under the influence of applied linguists, interest in the use of authentic materials for language teaching developed in the late 1970s. Many studies have been conducted on the methodology of using authentic materials and their effects on learners in the context of second and foreign language education. Here you can see some prominent names. Ganhart divided authentic materials into three categories. The first one is authentic listening materials, for example, cartoons, radio programs, news, and songs. The other one is authentic visual materials, such as street signs, postcards, magazines, and newspaper pictures. And the other one is authentic printed materials, for example, newspapers, train tickets, restaurant menus, and so on. The most common authentic materials that can be used in the classroom are newspapers, magazines, TV programs, movies, songs, and literary works, as you know. The internet also provides gateways to many collections of materials published specifically for foreign language teachers who can incorporate such materials into their speaking activities as well. Especially after COVID-19 global epidemic context, one of the most useful one is internet, we can say. In internet, you can find lots of authentic materials such as podcasts, digital photographs, travel announcements, online newspapers, and magazines. Authentic verbal materials may include elements of TV, radio, movies, and may also include online clips, short videos from sources such as YouTube, news website, Twitter, Facebook, or blogs, we can say. One of the main reasons for using authentic materials in the classroom is that the student is required to encounter the real-world language outside the safe and controlled language learning environment. That means that not the artificial language of the classroom. The role of the teacher is to prepare the learner for this real-world language use and raise awareness and give them the necessary skills to understand how language is actually used. Kim argues that authentic materials contribute greatly to overcoming certain cultural barriers to language learning. Sherman also stated that one reason why authentic materials are so important for language learning is that they are doors that are open to the culture. Authentic materials not only bring students closer to target language culture, but also affects their attitudes and motivations. Creation, in his monitor hypothesis, stated that materials tend to lower the affective filter as comprehensible input on topics of real interest to learners. That's authentic materials, we can say. Harmer in 1991 stated that using authentic materials can improve students' language skills. For example, according to Field, teaching listening should have a connection to real listening life. Edited materials that are proposed for teaching listening skills in the classroom don't present the real situation of the language, according to him. For example, when learners listen to recorded listening material, the speech is used more formal, which doesn't portray what commonly appears in an ordinary conversation. Also, some other researchers stated their beliefs about authentic materials in different language skills. Some research show that using authentic materials leads to oral language development, like Bacon and Feynman. Moreover, some other studies have confirmed that using authentic materials has great influence on developing reading comprehension by presenting new words and expressions to students. Harmer also points out that these are only authentic materials which actually develop students' listening and reading skills. Furthermore, I think someone, yes, okay, there are some comments. Also, some other researchers mentioned that developing students' strategies in comprehending authentic texts will lead to developing their writing proficiency in the target language. Garanto and Morley divide task authenticity into 3 categories. The first one is authenticity through real-world goals. Students have the chance to interact naturally in real time to achieve a specific communication goal. This is much more likely to lead to natural acquisition in learners, as it gives learners greater fluency than controlled practice. Also, when it comes to task authenticity, authentic materials and tasks should be used in the speaking class to encourage successful communication through information sharing. Information sharing can take place through both informal speaking activities, such as impromptu speeches, and formal speaking activities, such as oral presentations. Also, exploratory learning, debate, and discourse around real tasks are important because social interactions guide and stimulate student thinking. When peers or adults discuss their discoveries, hypotheses, or beliefs with students, students are challenged, presented with alternative views, or given new information. And all this process with these authentic tasks helps students to reconceptualize their understanding, reflect on their thoughts, or encourage students to seek additional explanations, and so on. The other category is about authenticity through real purpose. Pedagogical tasks should relate to real world tasks, for example, buying a train ticket, renting an apartment, reporting chemistry experiment, taking lecture notes, etc. Also, as I stated, authenticity through classroom interaction, negotiating task selection and order is important. And it's this negotiation process that's authentic. When it comes to students' beliefs, in the context of language acquisition, beliefs have been defined as implicit theories or self-constructed representational system. Understanding learner beliefs in this context is crucial, as successful learners have been noted to develop beliefs about their language learning process, their own abilities, and the use of effective learning strategies that have a facilitating effect on their learning. In this study, individual interview technique was used as a data collection method in the last academic year. For this purpose, 12 semi-structured open-ended questions, which were prepared by the researcher, were asked to the participants, and the answers were recorded with their consent, and all recorded data were transcribed after the interview. To analyze the data, thematic content analysis was used. According to Huberman and Miles, there's a useful sequence for thematic content and analysis. Firstly, I tried to get the meaning from set of transcripts, then patterns and themes were noted by me, and themes are counted to discern. Also, I tried to categorize whether one theme is more common than the other. Then I tried to create a framework and create a framework which is related to the literature review, and I try to look at the differences and similarities as well. There were just 16 students in this study. They were all studying at Karakaş University School of Foreign Languages department. They were on different levels. I tried to use random sampling technique. So there were 4A1, 4A2, 4B1, and 4B2 students as participants, and the participation was based on a voluntary basis. When it comes to findings, I'm not going to read all the answers, but I try to put just some prominent ones here. Firstly, I categorized according to the language skills of the responses regarding to different language skills and the relationship with the authentic materials. For example, firstly, I just asked a question like, do you support the use of authentic speaking materials and so on? Some prominent responses were like these. Most of the students seem to support the use of authentic speaking materials. Some of them think that when they are exposed to these kind of materials, they are more interested in the lesson, so their motivation level just improves. And some other students, like, for example, inclusion of more daily conversation topics facilitates the adaptation process. So this is important for their motivation level as well. One other student says, definitely we need to be forced to talk more. So they said that they are eager to talk or speak in classes more, and these kind of materials, authentic speaking materials, help them to talk more, give them the opportunity to be in communication with their friends in the class. Also, one other student said, I support it because as we speak in class, documents from different sources can contribute to the development of our vocabulary. So this result was also interesting. And one other student says, it will help me to know some formulaic language and phrases which they can use in real life outside the classroom. So this one was also important. When it comes to findings regarding the listening skills, when they were asked whether they support the use of authentic listening materials in their language classes, most of the students seem to support the use of authentic listening materials in their classes with different reasons. For example, some of them stated that they watch vlogs in the classes. It's helpful for their pronunciation. One of them said, yes, I support the use of all kinds of listening materials of the target language, accelerates learning as they enable you to get used to target language as well. So they have an opportunity to practice as well. The more they are exposed to language, the better they can talk, they stated. For example, one of them stated that if I want to learn a language, I have to be exposed to that language. I need to apply this both in the classroom and in my own life, which is what I have been doing. This student was a little bit more self-confident than the others. Also, this response was also interesting because the student stated that I support listening to things that I can hear in daily life in class motivates me. So, authentic materials include some elements which can you encounter in your daily life, and these kind of things, these kind of real life features, they really help them to motivate in the classes. When it comes to findings regarding to writing skills, most of the students seem to support the use of authentic writing materials in their language classes with different reasons as well. For example, one student stated that I support watching, commenting, and summarizing YouTube videos to improve our writing skills. Yes, because our ability to interpret improves. Here, one student stated that I would like to think more about writing things we see and put them in English, but I cannot think of a teacher who will read and evaluate them in a timely manner after we, the students, have written them. So here, one student complains about the feedback. So they would like to take more feedback after they have written something. Also, one student states the popular elements in authentic materials. So these kind of things can attract their attention more. And one student stated, mentioned Edmodo. As you know, it's a Web2 platform, you know. In the last academic year, the education was fully online in prep school. So they wrote something online on Edmodo.
You have roughly 5 minutes left, just to remind you.
5 minutes, okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. When it comes to findings regarding reading skills, you can see the responses of the learners. For example, most of the students seem to support the use of authentic reading materials in language classes. One response was so interesting. Definitely, it's not possible to learn English by just processing grammar through the book and doing some exercises. Being exposed to authentic materials not only gives us self-confidence, but also helps us to learn English more accurately and practically. So this student just criticized traditional language classes by giving examples with authentic materials. When it comes to challenges, when I asked them whether they had any difficulty or not in terms of using authentic materials in classes, they said, although I can't remember the situation specifically, there were a few times when I encountered sentence and word types that I had difficulty in understanding due to their complexity. So this situation is important. Even though such sentences were explained by the teacher, they had already been distracted and couldn't focus on the activity. And there were just some ideas regarding real-world language use. Here, most of the students, some of them explained in detail this situation. Using authentic material improves, gives them an opportunity to use them in real life. They can have an opportunity to practice in class and learn this in class and practice them outside the class. This is important. One student gave an example about an activity. Art, for example, he said that our teacher showed us a PPT including characters of Breaking Bad series, and characters introduced themselves to other characters, and necessary information was written on the slide, and all of us learned the patterns very easily. The other students just repeated this idea. When it comes to distance education context, one student from B1, B2 level stated that in the pre-COVID era, authentic materials were used by our teachers. They were on a mission to get our immediate attention or to make topic understood. Now it attracts our attention in online classes, but it becomes a bit like one of the course materials. It's necessary to choose them more carefully based on our interest. Here, this student just emphasized the selection of the materials, authentic materials. When it comes to the results, most of the students support the use of authentic materials in their language classes, seem to support. Most of the students in upper levels also find authentic materials motivating as they attract their attention during classes and include real-world language use. In general, they support the use of video and vlogs, especially at lower levels. And some of the students argue that today's distance education process makes teaching difficult, even if authentic materials are used in the lessons. In this sense, these students developed negative beliefs about distance education in general and authentic materials in particular. And lastly, some of the students claim that language in the authentic materials isn't suitable for the level of the students. This situation sometimes reduces students' interest in the lesson instead of motivating them. Looking at the correlation analysis by applying a questionnaire to more students on different levels will increase the validity and reliability of the study and will present more in-depth results, sure. But up to now, that's all. These are my references, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation, Kübra Hocam.
Our speaker will be from Burdur Mehmet Akif Ersoy University, Nagehan Demirdağ, an MA student, and her supervisor, Associate Professor Dr. Ali Karakaş. And the title of their presentation is What's the Good Language Teacher? Teacher Trainers, Views and Suggestions. And the floor is yours, Nagehan Hocam.
Thank you, Sedat Hocam. By the way, can you see my screen? Is it okay? My voice? Voice, okay. Hello, it's the last session, I know. Maybe everybody's tired, but I hope it won't be boring and it'll be fun. So my topic is, what is a good language teacher? And it's very broad, I know, but I will try to explain it. Before that, I'm Nagehan Demirdağ. It's my 7th year in teaching. I'm working in Istanbul and doing my master's in Burdur. Before I start, thank you for Ali Hoca's help in, he is a very, how can I say, I can't even find words, Ali Hocam, can you see? He is very helpful, he was very helpful throughout the process. So let's go on. What is a good language teacher? Before I ask that, what is a good teacher? When I ask this, this picture really affected me in a good way. So you can see the teacher as a candle, and it is a light for others. And this is the quotation that I really actually like about a teacher. A good teacher is the mediator who uses the educational institution's all available opportunities to create the best learning environment for the learners. I think this is a very broad and a very deep message. I will ask you a question, but before, I would just like to share a short video. I hope you like it. Okay, so this was a short part from Pink Panther, and she is an English language teacher. So how do you think an English teacher should be? What is a good language teacher? This is my question. And I have a question for you. If you have your phones with you, can you please answer? You just need to Google www.mentimeter.com, and this is the passcode. After the passcode, you can answer it. Or if you say, I have a QR code reader, you can just read the code and answer the questions. I like interactive kind of seminars, but I hope everybody's here and everybody is logging in. Let me share you my screen because I want to see your answers. 1 minute. My screen. Here, let me present it. Oh, okay. One answer. The one leading the students. Thank you. True. Are there any more answers? So I will look at this later after the seminar. You can just write www.mentimeter.com mentimeter.com, and this is the code 949854-3. At the end, I will try to look, please. I would kindly like you to answer the question because it's going to help me. Okay. Because we don't have time, I should go on. Let me look. No answers? Okay. Let me go back to my presentation. Okay. So, what is a good language teacher? This was my topic, but lots of scholars have talked about this for a long time, and it's a very broad concept. Some say that a good teacher is an effective teacher, and it can be understandable by ineffective teachers. And some point out some personal characteristics, how it is humorous, reliable, creating the expectation of high success, and the effective teachers of, for example, their readiness. So what is it actually? And my question is, does teacher education really make difference? The purpose of my study is that there's a need of an explanation from the experts of the field. There are lots of studies done with ELT students, teachers that are working right now in the field, but I think there is a need of explanation from the teacher trainees. And we need to understand better and need to understand the background of it. What makes a good and effective language teacher? As I said, my study, how is it different from it? Actually, the other studies have closed-ended surveys. I have here with Ali Hoca, we created an open-ended questionnaire, 3 questions, and one is about what makes a good language teacher. I will be showing you it. One emphasizes using metaphors, and one asks about the current language program, ELT program, that is being used now in Turkey. Before I go on with my study, what do I mean by the background? I mean, you are just not an English teacher. You have so many layers inside when you're being. So you have your identity, your beliefs, your competences, what you can do, your behavior, and a very important thing that it's the environment. Even if you have the background, will they let you use it? The environment is very important too. Here, I'm still studying actually, I'm still researching this. But for now, I have 60 participants, ELT trainees, that answered my questions about my study. It's a qualitative case study, and it begins with normal classical age gender questions and open-ended questions. Let me go on to my 60 participants with 45 ELT departments, and anyone willing to answer the questionnaire came. Let me go on. So here are my questions. The first one is, please explain what really makes a good language teacher in your view. So you could write a paragraph or 1 sentence. And the second one emphasizes to use actually metaphors. A good teacher, a language teacher, is like blah, blah, because he or she is like blah, blah. And the last question is asking if they think the new teacher education program really helps training good language teachers. Why and why not? I will be showing you some tables because I categorize them according to the answers. So the first question, I have 4 tables according to the answers. I try to put them in a table. The second question has 1 table and the third one has 1 table. My findings are like this. So referring to research question 1, the highest percentage in pedagogy and specific knowledge is knowledge and usage of methodologies. It has very high scores, 39%. And the second one is knowledge of teaching for skills. So let me show you an example of one of the teacher trainees, what they said. They said that a good language teacher listens and pays attention to the students' needs in order to adapt the teaching style and methodology so that the majority can understand the information presented. And it goes on so. This is the answer that I liked a lot, and it's a very high score, 39% according to this. My second table, here I looked at the personal qualities and some personal traits here. The highest score here is sense of humor and being reachable. So from the view of the teacher trainees, we can see that sense of humor is very important. So, okay, you can know good, you can be very knowledgeable, but another important factor is having a sense of humor. Let me show you an example here. Teacher 8 said, a good teacher should be one who adopts the humanistic perspective all through his or her personal work life. He and she should be reachable and open to communication, changes, and should have thirst for learning and transmitting what is learned. Another teacher 5 said that, I had to cut it, the teacher should model the students via her body language, a smiling face, eye movements, etc., and a sense of humor and her caring attitude. Moving on. Still referring to research question 1, professional skills. We can see that 2 of them have 21% reflecting learnings, meaning giving feedback, for example, homework, and adjusting himself or herself, teaching styles and strategies. We have lots of things here, but these are the highest ones. And the fourth one, referring to research question 1, classroom behavior. 34% shows that analyzes students' needs and interests. So we need to know about the background of the students, what they like to listen to. For example, in my class, one of my class is very kinesthetic and one of my class is musical. So I need to adapt according to, I will use teach the same topic, but in different kind of ways. How will they learn better? And encourage us to research, because we can't teach anything. I agree with this. They should be encouraged to learn themselves too, like autonomous learners. Here's an example here. A good language teacher listens and pays attention to students' needs in order to adapt the teaching style and methodology so that the majority can understand the information presented. Moving on, this refers to my second question, which is a fill in the blank. A good teacher is like blah, blah, because blah, blah. So here, a very high percentage with 25% is a full-time student. So wow, you're a teacher, but you're still studying as a teacher, you're a student. And the second highest one is sunshine. It was very, it was very nice to read these metaphors. I will show you one example here now and another one further on. So this one is very interesting. Both an ant and a king, because he should be hardworking as an ant, and he should be aware of the needs and goals and motivation as a king. I like this answer. I like things that how can I say it? Things that I am not aware of. I like these kinds of answers. And the fourth one said a good language teacher is like sunshine. She will alleviate all the negative feelings about foreign language, perceived characteristics of failure, and prejudices about being totally incapable of learning a foreign language and practicing foreign language. A very different description about sunshine. And the last one, the views of language teacher education program. This was very hard to put in a table because there were so many answers, but the current language program seems to have not enough practice hours. This is the biggest negative thing that I have seen among the answers. And the second one, the reducing the number of development of language skills does not help. So it's seen that there's a reduce of some language skills and it doesn't help. But is there all negative things? No, there are also positive things. A new step towards autonomy, for example, because our learners are not that autonomous. They don't study by their own. And another high score is does not create awareness of qualities to be successful in the profession. So we need awareness creating activities for the teachers to be an effective one. How to be effective. Here are two answers about the theoretical knowledge and practice, and 2 regular classroom hours are not enough. They need more of a number of this, they say. Yes, okay. In conclusion, we can see that pedagogy and specific knowledge, the usage of methodologies is the very most important thing. Regarding professional skills, reflecting the learning and adjusting the teaching styles is very important. And somebody who analyzes their students' needs and creating a better environment is very important. Teacher sense of humor and reachability is important. And last of all, what is a good teacher like? This is a very nice answer that I wanted to share with you. A full-time student and sunshine, full of pedagogical knowledge and can spread their knowledge like the rays of the sun. I hope all of us can be a teacher like this. And lastly, the program I said about does not have some significant changes from the previous one. And practicing hours, the lack of practicing hours can have a big side effect on, negative side effect on the teachers because they know theoretically, but they can't practice it. Thank you for listening and contributing. Here are mine and my advisors' emails. If you have any questions or anything to say, you can message me because I think I don't have any time.
Okay, thank you very much, Nagehan Hocam. And thank you for your punctuality, by the way. You just finished at the exact time. And if you have any questions, Nagehan Hocam shared the email addresses.
The floor is yours, Hocam.
Okay, thank you. Initially, I'm really thrilled to attend this conference. Before I go ahead and start the conference, I would like to express that I feel very lucky to get the opportunity of getting in contact with colleagues from different parts of the world or from different cities in Turkey. And I haven't had the chance of interacting with some of them, so I feel very excited about this opportunity. You know, looking at the big picture was sort of an idea, sort of reasons that we organize such kind of webinars for. So while I was working on my study, my primary motivation was offering a practical lesson for my colleagues. And I also experienced the same trouble of selecting correct materials and preparing a lesson to young learners. So I decided to go for it and prepare a practical plan as a model. Okay, when I look at the agenda, it seems that we are going to deal with young learners and the things to be considered in their lessons, with theoretical underpinnings, the details about the lesson design, the current study and the target audience, the lesson, my daily routines, and finally the conclusion. If we are talking about young learners, of course, we need to deal with the differences between adults and young learners. The first one is autonomy. Adults are quite autonomous. However, young learners do not have enough independence yet. When we look at their learning, young learners need a wide range of activities according to their different senses, and their attention span is too short. So we need to select the materials accordingly. However, adults can concentrate on the topics for a longer period of time. The other thing is anxiety. Young learners have no fear. They are eager to attend the lesson as long as they feel it or perceive it to be fun. But adults can be anxious or nervous every now and then. Other thing is motivation. Yes, adults have motivation and self-awareness indeed, but young learners have no reason to learn English. When we look at adults, they come to class to learn English for their academic reasons, career, or etc. But young learners have no reason, so they might be less motivated. And the most obvious difference is discipline, of course. If you are teaching young learners, you need to keep the lesson. You must be able to deal with the lesson effectively and calmly. However, discipline shouldn't be an issue for the adults. And the last difference is what they bring to class. Young learners bring enthusiasm, joy, curiosity. However, adults bring life experience to class. If you are talking about young learners, you need to refer to Piaget's theory because of the developmental stages of cognitive skills. It consists of 4 stages. However, we will directly concentrate on the third one, concrete operational stage, because of our audience. When we look at the characteristics, the first one is they are concrete and literal in their thinking at this point of development. But they become much more adept at using their logic, and they become less egocentric day by day. At first, they thought that the world is spinning around them. However, they learn that there are the people and their thoughts. Their thinking becomes more logical and organized, but they still struggle with the abstract and hypothetical concepts. And only at the age of 11, children begin using inductive logic or reasoning from specific information to a general principle. Yes, the lesson design. If you are working on the details of preparing a critical lesson for young learners, we need to very much understand those guidelines. We need to select the theme, text, or material, identify the language and focus, develop content objectives, identify learning strategies or critical thinking skills, and develop activities, sequence the activities. Early remarks that engaging learners in restricted tasks before productive tasks, presenting language before asking the students to practice, using controlled practice activities before independent ones, connecting one activity to the next, like smooth transitions, and using the content to recycle the language, and finally ordering the tasks to mirror real-life application of the tasks, attach importance to reach a fruitful result and lesson plan. We will also describe what, why, and how of each stage of the lesson, paying special attention to MI theory by Gardner, because by designing a lesson, it attaches importance in terms of offering learners a wide range of teaching materials like TPR songs, videos, animations, recordings, and different learning strategies. And as is widely acclaimed, effective lesson planning steps are warm-up, lead-in, presentation, practice, application, and assessment. When we look at the current study, our learners are fifth grade EFL learners, young Turkish EFL learners. As I have already referred, I also experienced some trouble selecting correct materials for young learners while I was teaching English lessons at Research and Application Center at the State University in Ankara, so I decided to go for it. And my participants were fifth grade young Turkish EFL learners, and they were at A1 level according to CFR. When we look at the reason behind this study, I can say that this is the first compact hour lesson for them, so they may not have prepared enough materials to take to the class with themselves. So they need to prepare something beforehand, just invite them to the lesson. And I have based the lesson on 4 basic and soft skills, basic skills and soft skills in the light of the current trends in ELT, these 3 hours compact course. This screenshot displays the expectations of learners according to CFR. As the course designer, I also regard the national philosophy of education and specific and general objectives of language teaching and the theoretical underpinnings of teaching materials, methods, and stakeholders of the curriculum. Warmers are not necessarily related with the lesson, but in this one, in order to alleviate the learner's anxiety, using icebreakers would make sense. The first one is find someone who, and it's all about tasks. Then when we look at the reading activities are actually integrated with warmers. It has to be related with the lesson, which introduce learners to new content, but also they activate the background knowledge of the learners. Our learners are not very young learners. They are at the 5th grade of their education, so they have already received some lessons in their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades. So this will also be beneficial for revising the old content. This activity is to be hung on the wall. It presents us some daily activities from the ones that we mostly do in the morning, in the afternoon. And learners need to create these cards to show what a typical routine would look like. And right after listening to the pronunciation, they will remember the meanings of them much better. And in the end, they will work in groups, come together and work in groups, and give them a rank, time order. Learners at this stage tend to relate everything to themselves. So we as teachers need to appeal to their curiosity. It's valuable for their engagement and personalization, as the scholars have suggested. We will also follow the EARS guidelines, and we will first of all teach receptive skills. The lesson starts with, the presentation starts with grammar aspects. They will listen to native speakers' accent. Yes, like this, and they will follow the lines, and they will apply the same procedure for the text of Nur. Then the teacher will focus on form instruction. The teacher will apply the focus on form instruction, as you see here in this exercise, instead of focus on the forms. And they will be Rama and Nur. These 2 characters will be introduced as the sisters, because they have already learned the family relationships. And we will also look at the 3rd sister as the following exercise, Emma's text. They will also imbue with the frequency of efforts, as you see underlined. They will also read and learn MR's daily routines, and she will be introduced as the third sister of these girls, just for the characterization. You know, this is very important for young learners in terms of developing their cognitive skills, logic and reasoning skills. Right. And in the end, it is easy to guess. Of course, they need to compare and contrast the daily routines of these three sisters. And they need to identify the similarities and differences and report this in front of the classroom. The teacher will appeal to apply this instruction during this point. And as the last character of this family, Julia will be with us. She will be the cousin of these three sisters, and right after learning her daily routines and completing this given length exercise, the students will introduce her to these three sisters. We will assume that they have not yet met before. They have not met yet. So right after learning her daily routines, the learners will introduce Julia to these three sisters. This is very beneficial, profitable, because it will increase the motivation, self-directed learning, conversational practices, and also it will lead them to build ownership of the language, construct self-confidence, and achieve creative learning in a non-creative learning atmosphere. The following activity will be a group game. The learners will come into groups, but the teacher will divide them into two groups, and it's a bit competitive. They will come in front of the board and write as many sentences as they can remember from the texts of 4 characters that they have just read. It will facilitate their intrinsic motivation, social development, and their well-being, as these scholars have always referred to. Using other videos for visual and oral input will be priceless, just to support a mind theory. Yes, the following video will be about a new context with the family, and this exercise checks learners' comprehension and specific grammar knowledge. Yes, and the other one is cartoons, another context with 2 friends in a park, which summarizes the lecture, and it also introduces us a new character, so they need to understand it and revise the content once again. Yes. Yes, I have thought that a funny crossword, yes, it can be assigned to learners as homework, because they need to fill the gaps in the puzzle, in the crossword indeed, and they need to match them with the correct phrases. If they have enough time in the classroom, they may also make some sentences according to themselves or one of their best friends using these verb and phrase combinations in the class. Yes, the last thing that I need to refer to is using songs. It's quite beneficial for young learners, for 5th grade, young Turkish EFL learners. This is the Pumpkins' new family. Then, while they were watching this short movie, they would also be exposed to the hours, and it will be a smooth transition to telling the times. Just to practice how to tell the time, they will watch another movie. Our main character is Peter here, and he adopts some kinesthetic activities. Yeah, they need to stand up and follow the instructions of Peter, and at the end of this exercise, they will be ready to answer these 3 questions about the time. I don't need to read one by one the profits of using songs, videos, and other audio visuals. It goes without saying. It has its own story indeed. I have just one suggestion for the teachers giving lessons to young learners. The learners can prepare their hands-on materials on their own beforehand, using some cardboards, colorful papers, or plates. It will prepare them for the lesson much better, I think. As a backup activity, I can also offer communication game. It's based on partnership. And this website is the one that I used to apply to in the past by giving lessons to young learners. It's quite enjoyable because it's in the format of a game, and they gain points, and if they run out of time, there is a warning. So they try to be competitive, and they try to find the correct answer as soon as possible, and they also practice English language. When I look at the assessment, the last phase of this study, it will be a project. They need to interview a neighbor or a teacher at school. They need to ask about the typical day or routines of these people and report it in front of the classroom. And additionally, they will also start giving in the language portfolios. You know, the opportunities that it offers to learners, like reflecting on the coursework, having an awareness of language learning processes, and improving the metacognitive skills. Unfortunately, I don't have any portfolio examples taken from my own students. I need to give place to some other portfolio assignments, and these are taken from German at lower secondary level, and the another one is from a Czech learner of German at lower secondary level. And these are my references. Thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you, Hocam.
Our next speaker is from Gazi University, Müzeyyen Nazlı Güngör, and her title is The Design of Emergency Remote Teaching Practicum and Action Research. The session is being recorded, so if you don't want to be recorded, please keep your video off. And Nazlı Hocam, please keep an eye on my video. I will raise my hand when you have only 5 minutes to finish. Okay.
Thank you very much, Hocam.
The screen is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to my session. In this session, I'm going to talk about my practical experience in emergency remote teaching times. And this is an action research study. At the end of the presentation, I will be pleased to take your questions and comments. First of all, in this presentation, I'm going to present you the local constraints and needs that student teachers and supervisors and mentors experience in the emergency remote teaching practicum. And then I will introduce my online action research design. And finally, I will share my implications for the future practices. First, let's remember what happened in that emergency remote teaching time. As we all know, we were in lockdown. It was the first time experience for us. And we didn't know what to do because we were trying to survive in this life. So everything was more difficult. I mean, all the process of life were more difficult for us. So we were all in global lockdown. And of course, this affected our education, teaching and learning practices at schools. So similarly, the practicum component also was affected by this reality. And by the Ministry of National Education in collaboration with the Council of Higher Education, supervisors in the practicum were required to continue teaching the practicum content asynchronously or synchronously, depending on their choice, and assess student teachers on their projects or tasks that they would submit. So it was a difficult process for supervisors, especially then, because there were several reasons for this. let's first remember our roles in the practicum. To start with the student teachers, they were expected to observe real classes, either face-to-face or online, but in emergency remote teaching, most of them were online. And they were supposed to prepare lesson plans and apply them in their teaching practice in the practicum schools. And they were also asked to attend the post-observation conference with their supervisors. And supervisors were required to help student teachers link theory and practice in the practicum, give feedback to student teachers on their lesson plans and teaching practices, and then, of course, help them, enable them to reflect on their teaching practices, again, in the practicum. And mentors, the cooperating teachers in state schools were more like the facilitator of the process at school. They served as the pedagogical tutor for student teachers, and they were also asked to observe student teachers' teaching practices and give feedback to them. But since it was also a first-time experience for them to teach online, they were also shocked, like us. So they didn't know what to do, how to do, etc. And according to the Ministry of National Education, in the practicum, we have three main components, actually. First, pedagogical reasoning. The second is about lesson planning and processes, parts of lesson planning. And finally, we have practice teaching and assessment part, right? So we also try to guide student teachers to follow these components, fulfill these components actually through different tasks, but we didn't know how to do it then. So in such a time, I thought that I could conduct an action research study in my practicum class. Why I decided on something like that? Because first of all, I believe in the power of reflection on the teaching and learning process. And also we know that action research by nature is cyclical, right? It is research informed and inquiry based. It is also interactive and it requires reflection by nature. And when we again think about the role of action research, when we check the literature, we can clearly see that it helps us address and find solutions to classroom-based problems based on our very specific teaching situations and experiences. It helps us to facilitate individual professional development of student teachers, enrich their research skills, and develop their lesson planning skills in the practicum. So why not, I said. And I also observed a disequilibrium between the emergent lockdown situations and the official practicum requirements, not necessarily by the student teachers, but also by mentors, by supervisors, etc. We were all, for example, gossiping, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to send those student teachers to those schools, etc. Because some mentors did not accept student teachers to observe their online classes, right, at that time. And I followed the cyclical action research model by Kimmins and McTaggart. And this was a qualitative and exploratory research study. And we went through the action research cycles in April and May 2020. My practicum class consisted of 7 student teachers, 4 of them were males and 3 were females. They were actually attending practicum in different state schools. Some of them were teaching English to young learners, some of them to high school students. And as I said, student teachers, because it was their right, it was their choice. I could not put the blame on them for this. So we were left with no mentor around, right? And I arranged my graduates actually, who were novice teachers then. So thanks God, they accepted my offer and they volunteered to become a mentor for my practicum student teachers. 4 of them were from Ankara, one from Hatay, one from Tokat, and one from Sakarya. So they voluntarily participated in this action research study. My student teachers went through these 4 stages in the action research. Now I'm going to focus on them one by one. In the planning phase, which was the first phase of the action research, scientific action research design, our aim was to deepen student teachers' knowledge and understanding about how mentors and students viewed remote teaching experiences and how parents were involved in this process. We had 4 questions here, 4 research questions. The constraints that mentors and students experienced, the needs of mentors and students in emergency remote teaching times. They actually developed their own open-ended interview questions, and they analyzed the classroom documents. They negotiated with their mentors and some students through Skype and on WhatsApp calls. In April and May, they did it twice. They went through this cycle twice. And finally, we held different meetings with those student teachers to analyze what responses they received. And the results of the online interviews student teachers made with mentors were like this. Most of the mentors were found it problematic, challenging, difficult to motivate students online, to manage classes in online platform, or let's say to increase students' participation, to spare enough time for feedback, right, etc. So most of these needs were grouped, categorized under 3 main categories. First one was on the constraints, the problems were related to online language teaching experience. As a second constraint, we had limitation problem reported by the mentors, and we also had technical support related problems. As for the students, I'm sorry, it says mentors, but actually this should be students, right? Results of the online interviews with students in state schools, they also reported some kind of problems like lack of technical equipment, necessary technical equipment due to social, economic and social cultural problems in the family, low family income, etc. And they had internet connection problems. Some of them were unwilling and shy to participate in the online classes, right? And they unfortunately suffered from the limitations of the platform on EBA. And after student teachers learned about those problems, needs, they started searching for solutions. And here is a list of sources, right? They use those sources to find solutions, actually, to help those mentors and their students in the practicum. And then they developed, student teachers developed their own lesson plans, remedial lesson plans, let's say, for each mentor. And mentors applied some of the lesson plans they liked. They thought that this could be applied in their classes, for example, and shared their observations with the student teachers afterwards. Here, I would like to mention one limitation of my study, and that is, unfortunately, because of the regulation by the Council of Higher Education, student teachers then were not allowed to apply their own lesson plans in the online platform on EBA. So they developed their lesson plans. They received feedback by me as a supervisor and by their mentors. And then after the reviews, they submitted their final plans to their mentors, and mentors could apply them in the classes, in their own classes. It was such a process. So mentors finally informed student teachers about the successful and less successful parts of their lesson plans. Then we organized a post-conference meeting about what went well, what went wrong, etc. So the process continued like this, and the focus of our meetings was usually centered around lesson introduction, delivery, and conclusion of the language item, online teaching materials, and digital tools that student teachers use as Then they went into the reflecting phase. Here, student teachers were asked to write their reflections on their experiences in both cycles in each month and self-evaluate themselves on the lesson plans they developed. They then submitted those reflections to me on our common drive folder, and they revised the whole process they spent and reflected on the challenges, the solutions, and further steps to be taken. By the way, the challenges here refer to the challenges of conducting an action research study as a student teacher. And we also had Skype meeting for deepening the answers of student teachers. Right. Here, I would like to share with you some of the narrations, let's say, claims by student teachers. I followed Burns' model, Burns' book here. So for her, at the end of the action research, student teachers should reflect on three main components. First, research process. Next, on their beliefs and values about the design of an action research study. And finally, on their own feelings and experiences about how they feel, how they or felt about the action research design and study. And let's come to the discussion and conclusions. First of all, I can say that this study really enabled the participants to communicate with each other in those emergency remote teaching times. And from this perspective, I can say that yes, it was a success, great success. And they could solve, at least try to solve problems through creativity, collaboration, and research in their lesson plans, and keep connectivity through different platforms, online platforms. I can say that although the context was online, the teaching and learning context was online, the communication and the participants' commitment to the tasks, problems, and content were all real. I can say also that more research needs to be carried out to understand how the different nature of online education, like the digital inequalities, contextual factors, etc., in not necessarily emergency remote teaching or COVID-19 and beyond, shapes or affects our own identities and competences in online education, because we can foresee that this will continue for some time more. And we should seek alternatives to minimize the social, economic, and digital inequalities experienced by different stakeholders, and to maximize collaboration and participation opportunities in online education through several projects. I think student teachers should be allowed to observe also online lessons, apply their own lesson plans, which they can do now in different platforms. And especially the nature of practicum tasks can include, for example, the integration of ICT, although most supervisors and student teachers follow this, still there are some who don't. I think it is useful, and they may integrate alternative assessment practices. Why not try them? Or problem-based scenarios. So for the problem-based scenarios application, I have a suggestion here. For the practicum component, you may consider using a workbook that we prepared with Professor Dr. Kübra Kıraç from Boğaziçi University as an outcome of İlk Erasmus Plus project in Turkey. It's for free, and you may use the workbook with your student teachers anytime if you are online, for example. There are more than 20 incidents from Turkish and Polish contexts, and there are 5 or 6 nearly follow-up questions. So you may encourage student teachers to collaborate with their counterparts in different parts of the world and country through teachers or teacher associations, groups on social media. Yes. Supervisors also may assign student teachers to teach online with the guidance of their mentors. They may teach, for example, the children of their mentors, relatives, etc., and they may observe the whole process. They may write about this teaching process. We have also in the literature different types of action research, like participatory, collaborative, exploratory, kind of. So you may also pick up one and guide your student teachers to carry out small-scale classroom-based research studies for further collaboration, interaction, and learning process. And here are my references. If you have any questions, I may take them now. Thank you very much for listening to me and for coming to my session. It was nice seeing you all. Yes, hocam.
Thank you very much. You managed to finish it on time. Congratulations.
Thank you.
If there are any questions, I can take one or two because we have like 2 more minutes. There doesn't seem to be any. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have one question. You said that students prepared the lesson plans and passed the lesson plans to the teachers, and they applied those lesson
Yes.
plans. Don't you think it is really very hard to use someone else's lesson plan to run a full class?
Yeah, in order not to feel like that, we actually invited mentors to collaborate on student teachers' lesson plans. They added their own views on it. They gave feedback about their classes because they know their classes more than us. So, yes, they were familiar, I mean.
Good, good. Suzan Hocam says excellent management of problems in the time of the pandemic. Thank you very much.